Hi YouTube, and this is JTrain997, and I'm back this time with my review of the Marvel Legends Face-Off set, Iron Man vs. the Mandarin. Now, of course, this is the Iron Man that I remembered most growing up as a kid. This is what's called the modular armor, meaning that Tony built this to adapt to any situation. He can kind of go and clip something on, and it'll be better suited for that situation. Supposedly when Hulkbuster first appeared, this was the base armor for Hulkbuster. And to kind of go along with that kind of Tony can clip something on, they give us two little attachments up here. Of course, a tiny Iron Man faceplate. Hope that fits on fine. It looks like it's going to be a tight squeeze. Of course, the base. Of course, you have a background and a comet back here. And of course, you get your own Mandarin figure with his two little magical blasts. Unfortunately, the Mandarin has a helmet on, and the variant for this set was War Machine. It was this exact same figure, except different color, and the face was a bit different. It was of course Rhodey. And the Mandarin was in a red robe, but he was unmasked. I would have much rather had the Mandarin in his green robe unmasked. That's just the Mandarin I'm more familiar with, but oh well. Okay, on to the back of the packaging. Of course, let's get this glare off here. Oops. Yeah, that's better than nothing. Of course, it says, Industrial Tycoon turned superhero Anthony Stark joined the Avengers as the invincible Iron Man after inventing a suit of near-indestructible armor. Using his armor's vast array of weaponry to fight for mankind, Iron Man would soon clash with the Mandarin, a would-be conqueror who employs the mystical might of 10 powerful rings. Seeking to use the technology behind Iron Man's armor as a means to advance his diabolical schemes, the Mandarin has waged war against his most despised enemy. Iron Man battles heroically, knowing that he alone stands in the way of the maniacal Mandarin's ultimate goal, world domination. Of course, down here you have the rest of the characters in the wave. Of course, this was on Face-Off Wave 2. And you have Wolverine vs. Sabretooth, first appearance Wolverine vs. Sabretooth, with their variants being both of them snarling. Of course, this set, like I said, the variant is War Machine and unmasked Red Robe Mandarin. And of course, Punisher vs. Jigsaw, with the variant being another Punisher and a business suit Jigsaw. So, that being said, very excited to have these guys. Let's pull these bad boys out of packaging. And here we have Iron Man out of packaging. Now, I had heard a lot of complaints before I had actually picked this set up about the paint detail on them, and it's very evident something's up with it. Of course, if you zoom in on his head, you'll notice there's some black splotches on his face there. Very unfortunate. Another thing about the helmet is, if I can just kind of rotate him, you'll see that it's kind of not really completely on. You can kind of see the edges poking out. I can't really find a way to keep it on without some part of his helmet kind of like bending out where you can see part of Tony's head. That's not a huge loss because at a distance you're never going to be able to tell, but still it's a little irritating. Of course, get a full 360 this bad boy. Of course, he has a place in the back for his little dupe stand that came with him. He does have both of his little modular accessories on, so they go on and off fine. Some minor detail, little spot of yellow paint. They're not the same, of course. They're two completely different little pieces. So, throwing those off to the side. Let's go into articulation. Of course, if you bend him down, you'll hear a very audible click, which I'm not used to in Marvel Legends, of course. Kind of locking him in place. Of course, very stiff all the way around, unfortunately. Of course, he does 360 degrees at the arm, out to about here, double jointed at the elbow, rotates at the glove, and his hand joint. Of course, he also, hand joint, of course, his hand goes down. Same for both arms. Over here, though, you have kind of a fist thing going on. Of course, he has a little repulsor marks in his glove. Close those up. Of course, he rotates 360 degrees. And, of course, as you saw there, the mask doesn't like to stay on, unfortunately. Disappointing, but, yeah, well. Of course, has a pretty decent range of movement. Double joint at the knee, rotates, foot joint, and I guess that's a toe joint. Same for both legs. Okay, so let's get him standing really quick. Like I said, this is the modular armor version, and it's the one I wanted more out of the... Well, it's the one I wanted most out of the Marvel look of the Marvel Legends Iron Mans, because the Marvel Legends made quite a few Iron Mans. Let's get him standing. Let's get a quick shot of Tony's face behind the mask there. Actually, a pretty decent job. That's another thing. As far as detail, There's some more errors with the paint. Like you can see there, it's kind of flaking around the chest. Over here on the side, there's some splashes of red where the yellow starts. That's unfortunate, but it's still a very nice looking Iron Man. Like I said, I'm going to have this on a shelf. From a distance, you won't be able to tell. The articulation's a little stiff. I'm not incredibly thrilled with the faceplate, although it will stay on. This guy by himself on eBay will go for... I've seen him go upwards of $30 or more by himself, which is surprising. Which he's actually a pretty nice Iron Man figure, but he is not without his flaws, unfortunately. Got his head articulation, of course, left and right, and very slight up and down. So that being said, let's move on to the Mandarin. And here we have the Mandarin, and I have both of his little magical blast attached to his hands. Now, of course, his little magical blasts are actually sculpted to his hands. They're kind of translucent, so it's going to be hard to see, but you can see a little spot, and there's a place for his thumb to rest. I had heard about this Mandarin, like Iron Man, before I had ever messed with him. I had seen a few reviews. I had heard a couple of my friends who had bought the figure complain. This robe prevents any articulation, and I do mean any. It's one solid piece of rubber all the way around. And I've heard a lot of different excuses for this. The one that seems to be the most believed theory is that this was actually supposed to be a thinner type of plastic, kind of like the legendary Rider Wolverine's leather jacket. You know, it looks like a robe, but it allows flexibility. And there was an error at the factory or something like that. I'm not 100%. So we ended up with a Mandarin who's pretty much non-movable, which is unfortunate because one of my friends actually went as far as cutting the robe off of him, and he has a very nicely articulated body. As you can see here, some very flexible joints. This leg's actually a little loose, but, well, it's really loose actually, but with the robe the way it is, it's pretty much going to keep the figure standing no matter what. So let's get him posed really quick. It's got a full 360. There's some very nice detail on the robe. And like I said, I wanted the helmet Mandarin more. I mean, the unmasked Mandarin more. Try and get his legs straight up. But that's not to say there's not some very nice detail in the helmet. Of course, actually, it looks like it's a bit brighter paint, maybe an enamel paint than they used on the robe. A little bit glossier. That's what I'm trying to say. And the rings on this hand, which, if you look on the back of the packaging, actually it looks like the sleeves were originally meant to stop about here, so you could still see his hands pretty well, but you end up with this. And you can see there's actually some very nice detail on the rings, although the paint kind of suffers. And there's some nice gold detail over here. And then you get to this hand, where the rings are flesh colored, with the exception of the gems on this side, which is really irritating because you can't even tell they're rings. It just looks like he has gems embedded in his fingers. So zero articulation, and like I said, there's some paint details over here where you can tell the yellow went where the green was, and the paint on these figures is definitely not a prime example of what Marvel Legends from Toy Biz could do. So pretty much zero articulation, and the leg is very wobbly, unfortunately. But with the robe the way it is, that's not hindering it. I really wanted a Mandarin, so I feel like this figure's actually, I mean, if you get him offline, he'll usually go between $15 to $20 loose. So it's not if you gotta have a Mandarin, if you just want him in the back posed, he's not going to be a terrible figure because he's going to stand fine. He's going to look awesome from a distance. When you start inspecting him, he might fall apart, but I still kind of like him. He's definitely not without his flaws. Actually, I think I just spotted another bit of paint failure on Toy Biz's part. The little black around the robe right there you can see is a yellow instead of black. Once again, not too thrilled about that. But Mandarin's still okay, but I'm not amazed by him. That being said, let's move on to the base. And here you have the cardboard background with the base. Both the little dupe stands on there. Of course, you see Stark up there. It's actually not a bad, I mean, it's just a hunk of cardboard, but there's some nice detail in there. Like it's an outer space base, and it's just kind of a station where Tony keeps all his armor. Of course, let's get the figures on here. Should have these tightened up. Iron Man can fly, and Mandarin can levitate, so It's actually not too bad of a base. They'll both stay. Mandarin's a little heavy. I'm concerned about him. Yeah, Mandarin's wanting to make this set topple, as you can see there. So that's unfortunate. Let's try yeah, that's not helping at all. So, you can still attach him while he's on the ground. There might be some problems with making Mandarin levitate. Overall, this set will run you anywhere between $30 to $50 offline. Now, both of the figures look great, but they really start to fall apart upon inspection. They both have some serious paint failure. Tony's mask really has a problem staying on. Mandarin has zero articulation, with the exception of being able to bend his hands and what little you can see from his robe. $50 is too much for this set. If you can get it for $30 and you're an Iron Man fan, I would pick it up. But if you're not an Iron Man fan, you might want to go with one of the other face-off sets. Personally, I'm a decent Iron Man fan myself, and I really wanted both of these figures. They're going to look nice displayed. Of course, I'm not going to have this base or any part of it displayed, but so I still like it. But I'd only recommend it for a very serious Iron Man fan. This is JTrain997 saying I'll see you soon, YouTube.